Welcome to the next Let's Build with JavaScript video. And this one's going to focus on accordions. If you're new here and haven't seen the series that I'm putting together, I have a not complete, but in the process of being completed, tutorial series based on vanilla JavaScript on either my YouTube channel called webcrunch or my blog web-crunch.com. Both of those places you'll find the home for these particular tutorials, plus some source code and other links that are handy. Again, if you're new here, I did this complete kind of concept with a Ruby on Rails version on my channel as well. So if you're interested in that, definitely check it out. But yeah, we're basically going in and avoiding any type of framework and making these components from scratch using JavaScript, just plain old JavaScript. We'll use hints of ES6 here and there, but definitely nothing that's too fancy for now. But the general concept of this video is the accordion, like I said. So I'm using Tailwind, which is a CSS framework. It's a utility-driven framework. I can look it up for you. This site is dedicated to it, but it's essentially a way to write very atomic styled CSS, and it may look overwhelming at first, but in theory you're still writing CSS, but you're doing it within your HTML as opposed to actually in a CSS file. Granted, you will still need to write some custom styles here and there in any typical advanced web design project, but this gets a lot of the basic stuff done for you, and you never need to really add stuff, and that's the key. So your CSS won't bloat in the end, and it's very reusable. So accompanying that, I'm also using hero patterns, which is basically just a repeatable SVG background image themed to whatever colors you prefer. You could set the opacity as well. It's at heropatterns.com. Really cool site, really cool resource just for sprucing up a background image. So here you see some point-to-point like a electrical board or something like that. But the final piece here is just a accordion I created for my own demo purposes, but it just shows off skills, links, and stuff I've done. So by default, the first accordion is shown. The second one we'll click on, it hides the first. The second shown. Same is true for the third, and yada yada. So it's all basic. On the way, I've done some CSS transitions that make the icons flip, and then there's some slight animations going on when we do activate a particular accordion panel. So how is this done? Well, a huge part of it is obviously CSS and HTML. So this is the final pin, which I'll link you to in the very end, or in the description of the video you're watching this, or on the blog. So you'll find it in multiple places, but essentially this is the HTML we're working with. And I know Tailwind, like I said, looks a little jarring at first glance, but it is very useful in the sense of I don't have to go and use someone else's design for these components like you would with Bootstrap. So here I'm targeting a basic accordion, which is called an accordion item, and then we duplicate that for each row we have here. So accordion item in essence is going to be this entire block, so this row plus this block below it. And what we'll do is make use of that HTML and find it with JavaScript, and then hide and show the actual accordion content within that div. So if you look, some of these classes definitely aren't part of Tailwind, and that's on purpose. That's stuff that I've created for the sake of doing our JavaScript, and you can too. You can add IDs. I prefer to use classes almost always, just because they are reusable, and the ID is kind of a one-use scenario. Up to you there, but no way is the wrong way as long as it works. There are preferences in the community though. So on top of that, I'm accessing some open source icons, which you can grab as well. I think they're by the same guy here who created these hero icons or something like that. There's another icon package I found that is just an open SVG source. A neat thing with SVGs on Tailwind is you can add this class called fill current, and then give it a text color property, which there's a ton to choose from if you want to really see real quick what they are. Here's all of them by default. So you can obviously strip away colors you don't use in your configuration, but For our purposes, I'll just use the default stuff. That's a CDN, of which the author of this definitely recommends not using a CDN because it's a lot of CSS to load, which I agree with. Yeah, so far nothing's working, obviously, but we do have our components. The tab accordion content below is hidden by default with the hidden class. So if I were to remove that, that one should show the links there. Yeah. So I'll undo that. And you can feel free to customize these styles, do whatever you want to do. It's an open canvas in my opinion. On top of that, I've got this crazy background image sourced from Hero Patterns. They literally supply you with the CSS to do that, so you don't have to really worry a bunch about it. It is a base 64 SVG, so it's kind of all embedded here as opposed to linking to something hosted. And then accordion item is going to be that whole block like I mentioned. And then we'll eventually add an active class to the item itself. And so with CSS, you can target that once it's active to do these different transformations. Like I showed you in this final piece, this icon, the chevron down becomes a chevron up and so forth as you toggle through these. So it's pretty nifty stuff you can just do with just CSS alone. And then we just add some animations, which is just the basic fade in, which I've supplied down here as a keyframes, and supplied an actual class if we wanted to add it to more things, which I believe I did in the end. You can go crazy with this and make it even more cool in terms of animation, but I just went with some basic stuff for now. We do have a clean slate with our JavaScript, and what I want to basically do at first is get all of the accordion items. So let's jump in and do that. So I'm going to do some ES6 consts, and I'll call it accordion items. And we'll go and make a document query selector. Select or. And we're going to use all in this case because we want to find them all. So I'm going to do it by the class name of accordion item. So if you don't recall what that is, it's each block in essence. So that accordion item, and our last one here. I added the avatar just for grins. So I pulled in from a secure your avatar URL. Neat thing though is you can pass in actual number here and just say how big you want it if you ever needed to do something like this. So there's 100 pixels. We'll just go with 80 for now though. Okay, cool. So with those hidden by default, we've got everything we need to grab the whole thing. So let's go also and do a query selector all for the accordion content panes. So these are the ULs or unordered lists inside of each accordion item. So that's going to be like the main list of links or content that I'm actually hiding and showing in the accordion itself. And another query selector all will do accordion content. Great. Cool. So if we have those, if you want to just for grins see what that looks like as it comes back, we can do a console log of accordion items, and I'll pull dev console, and we have a node list. So it's essentially an array of each of those divs, which is what we want. And then we could do content panes here to see the same thing. There we go. So like I said, they're unordered lists, so we get each, which is great. That's what we're after. Let me clear this, maybe leave this open for now. Okay, so what we want to first do is show the first one by default. Most accordions have one shown first. That is just like a quick inclination of what that thing is. So we'll say show by default. So first by default. And what I'll do is access our accordion items variable. and I'll say the first. So since it's an array, you can access each individual thing within an array by doing something like this. So 0 in terms of programming is going to be 1 in this case. So it always starts at 0. Just always remember that. And with no matter what programming you do, an array starts at 0. Or basically any type of programming number starts at 0. So here's our first one. If you see I hover over it, it actually highlights on the right that it is indeed the first one. So if we were to enter 1 here, it would actually go to the next one in chain. And I could go and highlight that, and you'll see it linked to that. So great. So with that done, we basically want to target this thing and query selector. So we're going to use it as the instance to query through. Up here we use document, which is the whole window. Here we're using this thing, which is just the first one, which is the accordion item itself, to query selector down for our accordion content, since that's embedded. Because we only want to scope it to the first one, so that's how we're able to do so. And then once we do that, we can add a class, or remove a class, excuse me, dot remove hidden. So if you didn't want to deal with this with JavaScript, you could just simply remove the hidden class from the very first one, but you'll have to add it later, which is the trick. So that's why I'm doing it first and initializing it this way. Okay, so what we want to do now, I can't click on any of these and basically hide and show the other panels. I want to do that, and that's kind of the promise of accordion. So what we want to do is just hide each besides the targeted accordion on click. So whichever one we target, we want to hide every other one. So to do that, we're essentially going to loop through all of them, figure out which one is the targeted accordion, and then for each other one, add a class, or add a class of hidden. That's going to look like this. So accordion items are a variable, and then a nice for each. So for each is a function that allows you to iterate over an array only. You can't use an object inside of one of those. So just always think in terms of arrays with for each. So it looks like that, and you might think with ES6 you could do something like this with the arrow function and get away with it. It's not necessarily true in this case. It's going to act a little odd. So I'm going to go back to the actual function literal there and add that back. And inside here we'll say the clicked accordions clickable target. So that's going to look like this. So const accordion title row, which is essentially each top row here. That's what I'm calling the title row. And we're going to take the accordion itself, which we're accessing by passing it through here. So this stands for something that's looped through each time we iterate over the array. So this stands for that current one we're looping through, if that isn't quite clear. And then we'll say first element child. So you're probably like, how did you know to type that? Well, if you console log accordion itself, we'll come back with 3 of them because there's 3. Let me just try that again so it's cleaner. All right, so that's great. We get each one, which is what we want. We're not doing anything to manipulate them yet, but in each, this is what I love about Firefox. You can go and basically inspect the DOM tree of that element. And what we're going to do is look basically through the list. I don't know these things when I'm going through this list, but I just look for things that might give me access to elements close to the current item. And sure enough, it is the first element child attribute here. So it's getting access to that title row, which is what we want in terms of being the clickable target. So that's how I end up with that. So if we get first, the dot notation, first element child, that should come back on its own. Let me filter this through. And we get, for each one, we're getting each title row now instead of the actual accordion itself, which is exactly what we're after. So then, using our console, I'll maybe just comment that for now. I'll go through and use our new variable and then add an event listener for each one. And it will be a click event. And we'll call a function called toggle accordion. Now you could type this all in line here, but I'd recommend extracting it because it is quite cleaner to do so. And it's a little more object oriented. So since we called that function, we might as well make it. So you'll do that by typing function toggle accordion. Great. And since this is within a click event, an actual event listener function, we can actually pass the event through, and you don't need to specify anything here. It's just assume that you can do so in this bit here. So what I'll do is type E. I like to use E instead of like an actual event as a query parameter there. It's just a personal preference. You can use whatever you want though. Okay, so within each of this, or within this, I will take the content panes variable we set way in the beginning. I'll just copy that down, paste that down, and then I'll do another for each through that one. And again, pass the function, and we'll just call it content. You can again pass that through and call it what you want. It's something relative to what it is you're looping through, would make the most sense. So here we'll check if the clicked row matches the contents previous element sibling. So that might seem a little confusing, but what we're going to do is do an if statement, and we'll check the content dot previous element sibling. And I'll show you how I got to that in a second, is exactly equal to the target. So event.target, which is whatever it is you click on. So let me console log content. And we should get back 3 content panes on a click. So it needs to be through an event, because you remember we're passing this through a click event. So there we go. I clicked on skills and we get all 3. And what we can do is look in the DOM tree here, and since I'm looking for a exact target, where I click is going to be the actual row itself. So without specifying an exact class or something, I want to do it dynamically. And the way to do that is using the DOM tree references we get. So to make that more clear, if I just go through this list and look for a way or somehow to get close to this header row, this active row, we'll be in good shape. And sure enough, you see this one, previous element sibling, has the exact same class and row we're after. So that allows us to basically have that placeholder there and do this check. If we click on it, then we're going to do something in particular. So just to do one more pass at that, we should get 3 back, but it's going to be on a click, and it's going to be the title rows, which is perfect. Okay, so with that out of the way, with that check in place, what we want to do on the click of a row is what I'm going to call remove class, which is a function I'm going to create, content and hidden. This is a great way to abstract what you are constantly repeating into another function. And this is kind of object-oriented approach, like 101. So since I often remove and add classes, I don't really always like to write them in lines. So you can do like a helper kind of thing and create a function out of it. And what we'll do is pass in the element and in the class you want to give it, or yeah, in this case, give it since it's add. And then we can use these things as our way to target whatever you pass. So we'll say l.classList, and then the class itself. So I don't use the actual term class because that's a protected word in JavaScript. So I'm going to leave that out. I just use the K version here so that we could do the same for removing class. So remove class, L class, and then we'll just do the same kind of concept. So class list, but instead remove and then class. Simple enough. And this might seem kind of redundant because like this one line is actually less code than this whole function, but in a way it's maybe a little more legible of what's going on in terms of the code itself. You don't have to worry about querying for something or anything like that. So it's up to you how you want to use that. You don't necessarily need to do anything like that, but I think once you get to this state where you have a lot going on in one function, you can pass it through like this. That would make more sense, like we did with the event listener. So again, when I remove a class, I'm passing in the element I want to target and then the class I'm going to remove. So in this case, it's the content, which in our case will be one of the content panes that we click on. It'll be the exact one, in fact. And then we will actually add a class to the contents.parent element, and it will be active. So again, if you see a pattern here, we could just say console log content. And like, how did I get parent element? Well, I want to add a class to the whole accordion itself, the whole accordion block. That way I can use CSS to scope things if I need to, as opposed to adding classes on the individual content pane itself. So what I mean by that is when I console log this, we'll get our content block back when we click. Within that, I have a attribute called parent element or parent node. They're pretty much the same thing. And what I will do is target it. So you can see how that stands for that entire block. Let me go back. I lost my spot. So right here, parent node, same difference. So that's pretty handy. And that's the way we're going to add a class of active to it. So here we're actually doing that when I click on it. If you want to double check and see the source, we could do so as well. So let's see. Okay, so it has a class of active. That took way too long, sorry. But you can see those things firing on that event, which is perfect. Instead of that working, you notice I can open all of these now, but nothing closes, and that's a problem. So we can just essentially pass an else here and just basically say that unless the target that is clicked is this actual content's previous element sibling, then remove the class or add the class of hidden, and it'll be on content, and we'll just say hidden. And then if you could guess, we are actually going to do the same with the active state, but we're going to remove it in this case. So that said gives us our actual toggleable state, which is exactly what I want. So on my own, this took much longer because I styled it and made it look cool and stuff, but you can do the same and experiment with Tailwind maybe in the process. Maybe I'll do a video on Tailwind just to give you a fresh take on why you might want to use it. But otherwise, this is the approach we could take to using pretty minimal styles that look pretty good, creating our own custom component that's totally maybe 30 lines of JavaScript, if that. We probably don't need half of these lines if we really wanted to clean things up. But essentially that's it. That's how you create a accordion with vanilla JavaScript. Like I said, you could enhance this further by adding some transition effects or more animations based on the events and whatnot. There's also enhancement you could do that I didn't get to, but if you were to click on the same row that was already active, maybe it should close and open just the first one or something like that. So it's reset in essence. So that's just a concept. I really appreciate the ongoing support, and maybe tell your friends by liking the video itself. That would be great, or share it with your friends. The blog is the same way. That's where I kind of author all this stuff first. So definitely check that stuff out. I'm going to keep this train rolling. If you're interested in other videos, feel free to reach out and comment maybe other concepts you'd like to see, if it's something more pertaining to just JavaScript in a nutshell. I do plan to maybe explore some frameworks coming up. Nothing crazy like building an entire app per se, but more or less just introductory stuff, because in my day-to-day, my focus is to use as much vanilla JavaScript as possible. I think for common things like this, I don't need to reach for Vue or React or something like that, unless it's just a global app already set with something like that. But the need for it is becoming less and less, and that's the same is kind of true with CSS. I don't really reach for crazy Sass-based stuff anymore, which is very cool that our technology is catching up. So enough rambling. Thanks for watching. Peace.